Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inky Thoughts podcast. Today, I'm not going to waste too much of your time introducing the topic. We're going to do it very simply because I've been racking my brain about what exactly to talk about. I think I'm actually going to try instead to do a lot more listening today. I know, very weird. I talk a lot normally. I'm even talking a lot right now. But today, it's going to be about Inuit tattooing, both in somewhat of historical context, I would imagine. We do got to know a bit about where it's from and what it meant, and a bit about the modern context as well. And to give my background to this, I'm from, you could say, the colonial power in this setting. I'm Danish born and bred, and we technically, Greenland is part of the Danish territory because of colonial invasion, you could say. No, not you could say. That is exactly what happened, actually. And today, Greenland is part of Denmark, so to speak, but it's also its own autonomous culture and country. And my guest today, however, is not just some white pasty Danish guy with red hair. She is, however, a renowned tattoo artist and also has been part of I hope she'll correct me if I get this wrong, but part of reviving some of the old tattoo traditions and gathering knowledge and research on Inuit tattoo traditions as well. Maya, before I fumble this anymore, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Maya Sialuk Jacobsen, and I am half Greenlandic, half Danish. So I'm half pasty.
That is true.
My father is Danish, which is a very normal thing in Greenland. We have all these John Lennon, Yoko Ono relationships all over the place. We are very mixed people. I'm from a part of Greenland in the northwest, the Disco Bay. I'm from the Disco Island itself. It's a very small town where, when I was a kid, it was a hunters and fishing area. So that is how I grew up, with the traditional Greenlandic way of being in nature and hunting. I'm 54 years old, and or as we would say in Greenland, I'm born in 1969. We always year rather than the age.
I think that's smart, very smart.
Yeah, and actually I find it easier to relate to history and time in what's going on when I hear the year that people are born rather than how old they are. And that relates a lot to my work as well, where I place patterns and historical events next to what happened in Europe or the rest of the world. But I've been a tattooer for 20 something years, a long time. The first 10 years as a Western regular tattooer, and I was traveling a lot and doing a lot of tattoo conventions. I was co-owner of 2 tattoo shops in Norway, Oslo. And after 10 years, I had so many injuries in my body from tattooing. I was kind of forced to stop using the machines, and I started hand poking, and at the same time I founded the research project Inuit Tattoo Traditions. So I've been doing that this is my 14th year, and been gathering patterns, analyzing patterns, researching all the areas that are touching in on the tattoos, like religion, hunting types, hunting tools, hunting methods, geographical differences in hunting methods, and etc., because that is closely connected to the tattoo patterns. I started out by going visually at it, like
Yes.
what does it look like and who wears it. And very clearly, very quickly, I realized it is a female practice. So that just piqued my interest, because when you read the history of our people, and as researched as we are, perhaps one of the most researched people on earth, there's not a lot about the woman. There's a lot about the hunter and his abilities out in the nature and the ingenious tools, etc. But the woman is kind of neglected in research. So I was very interested in finding out then, but why? You know, I had to find out why all the women were tattooed. And so I started reading. I was basically reading for 4 years. After finding patterns, then next to finding patterns, I started reading everything I could find: anthropology, ethnology, travel memoirs, polar explorer diaries, missionaries' diaries. And then I realized these are all white men who are Christian, who are describing my culture.
Yeah, I was about to say that there's a big bias with a lot of especially early European exploring and
Oh,
research that's all
oh,
white
yes,
men. And then even when they encounter cultures where they're not male-centered, they sort of
yes,
impose this white
absolutely.
male
Yeah,
ideal where the man's the sort of natural, not at all correct, by the way, but naturally given leader and all that stuff, which is
yes, yes,
I think it was sort of a weird backwards way of trying to protect the ideals they wanted to embolden in Europe. So
yeah,
whenever they met cultures like the Inuit one in
yeah,
Greenland, Alaska, and Canada,
yeah.
they would like erase that because they might give people ideas back home if they hear about a culture where women have more power and autonomy.
I even think that quite often they didn't see it. There
That might be
was
true as
only
well.
the one way. I mean, there's
Yeah.
the one truth and there's the one way. If you're reading
Mm,
from 1700 something,
mm.
there's definitely only one person who can know everything, and that is God. And then God
Oof.
has, like, you know, and
Yeah.
this weird system of just having that one truth and not being open
Mm,
to anything else, other worldviews or religions.
mm,
I mean, the Inuit religion is up until now not even spoken about as a religion.
mm.
It is spoken about as superstition,
Yeah.
stupidity, nonsense, etc. But no one actually sat down and kind of made a definition on the religion. Well, I
Mm,
needed that. I needed a definition. So I started reading up on the religion. I started applying my own lived experience of what is left in us, learned to recognize it,
mm,
also by getting to know those white men that were writing about
mm,
us. I had to read about the European idea. I had to
mm.
read about, what does it mean to be a missionary? I didn't know. What does it actually,
Yes.
why is there a guy from Norway who's like gung ho on going to Greenland and
Yeah.
things? I mean, what drives him? I had to understand these things.
Mm.
And I mean, those 4 years of reading was also very angry making. It was
Yeah, I can imagine
upsetting.
so frustrating, I can imagine.
And I looked at other people who were researching other things, and like white people who were researching the
Mm,
Samoan tattooing or whatever. And I was like,
mm,
how nice it must be not having to put the book down once in a while and have a good,
mm.
but
Yeah.
in just say, oh my, that is horrible, you know.
Yeah.
But
There's a certain disconnect when it's not your people, the
yeah,
atrocities have been committed towards that.
yeah. Or if we turn that around,
Mm,
there's an extreme connection when
yeah.
you are researching your own people.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I went into this research unaware of this. I
Mm.
was
Oh,
unaware, not a trained researcher. I had no
oh.
idea. I didn't know a lot of academic people. I was a tattooer and I was an asshole like any other tattooer.
Yes.
biker boots and tattoo conventions and
Mm.
liners and shaders and uh, I'm just a little bit brainy, so
Yeah.
I was able to teach myself how to do research. Along
Mm.
the way, I got to know more and more academic people who I would cross paths with,
Mm.
and I realized I'm actually doing research the way people are taught. So there is
Yeah.
like a logical way to do this, and I'm
Mm.
doing. Uh, but I started realizing also that it was very easy for me to do the intangible
Mm.
culture. Not easy, but interesting to me,
Yeah.
maybe. And I had a knack for it too, understanding the patterns, trusting my gut feeling, trusting my lived experience and what is
Mm.
left of that experience of my ancestors, etc.
Mm.
That are, you know, it's just understandable language to me to read the
Yeah.
Inuit. I cannot explain completely why, but I trusted the feeling. But after getting research partners and in tattoo history in general,
Yeah.
I have a few research buddies that are into tattoo research, and I started looking more and more at the archaeology of things,
Mm.
um, and that led to huge results, like actually being able to place patterns where they're not described or depicted, but based on objects,
Mm.
and so dating patterns on dated objects. So, you
Wow.
know, it was very helpful to do that. And that got me into the mummy research. And that is kind of where I am today.
That's quite a cool thing to say at the end there, like that you sort of glossed over. That got me into the mummy research. I mean, as a
Yeah.
sociologist, I gotta say that's one thing I admire whenever I meet people into archaeology and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, we fiddle with mummies, we look at like cool old objects and that. I'm like, well, I interview people. It's very exciting,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's
Yeah.
people.
I mean, working with the mummies, it's the most exciting thing for me because it's literal people with
Yes.
literal tattoos,
Mm.
with literal carbon dating, etc.
That
So
is absolutely fascinating. I gotta
I
ask, just to clarify for my own non-archaeological brain, is it then
sure.
mummies of the same kind as Ötzi? Because I imagine that would be the kind of frost and glacial
Yeah,
uh, uh, climate to create ice mummies, or is it a different kind of mummy?
it's a different kind. I'm also actually Ötzi. There's a paper coming out that I'm part of on Ötzi very soon.
Mm,
Two people.
nice.
Yeah.
I bet
No.
Matt Lotta is really excited about that one, to be honest.
Yeah, most likely. I love Matt.
Yeah, same,
Um,
same, same. I'm seeing him
but
next week at the Brighton Tattoo Convention, so that's gonna be great.
no way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I
You
met him,
have
and
you have to mention me.
I hesitate to say friends because I don't want to presume he is English. So it's not like us where it's like, oh yeah, he's my buddy now. Like, but we got along very well when I met him at a conference in tattoo research last year when I was still
Oh,
trying to do a
man.
PhD. I've dropped out, but very fascinating guy. And
Okay.
I know in his painted people, I don't know if you had a hand
Yeah.
in that, but there was a bit
Yeah.
about Inuit tattooing as well. And I imagine you probably helped him out a bit with that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And my name is in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
did.
Fuck, I did see your name in there. I forgot about.
Because
Bad memory.
what happened was that Matt asked me if I had some published
Mm.
material on my work, and I didn't at that point yet.
Mm.
Um, so I said to him, "You're just gonna have to interview me." And
Yeah.
so he did that. I think we spoke twice or something, and then a lot of
Yeah.
back and forth, and
Mm.
you know, yeah, because it is so hard to grasp this
Yeah.
worldview and the why and the how and the myths
It is very
and
vast. It is
yeah.
very vast. And it's quite impressive to see what you have been able to uncover. I mean, and
Yeah.
do correct me if I remember wrongly, but you uncovered even like some of the old sacred to I think might be the right word materials and also techniques of how Inuits tattooed, which is
Yes.
most people only ever heard about that sort of rumors or like little
Yeah.
tidbits here and there, but you actually uncovered some of this.
Yes. And because working with the archaeologists and those guys, this sorry, that was my son.
Uh,
So the a whole world of experimental archaeology opened
yeah.
up. And being a tattooer, I want to use my hands,
Mm.
and then I was reading about methods and tools and uh, from described by polar explorers or uh, seafarers and sometimes the occasional anthropologist here and there, and none of these people were tattooed or
Mm.
even less tattooers,
Mm.
and so I'm gonna try. That's what I thought.
I
I'm gonna
mean,
give it a go.
it seems like the logical step. I'll give you that. Like when you sort of have
Right.
some know-how about it already, and to try it out, see how it holds up.
Yeah, because just reading about it, like, okay, there's this awl. It's definitely used for poking. And
Mm.
I looked at the awl and I was like, it's definitely not, because I know I know what a tattoo is supposed to look like. And
Mm.
it's way too thin. But then it was a whole adventure of reading
Yeah.
up on methods in the Americas, from North America down to South America, because
Wow.
what is popularly called skin stitching, the
Yeah.
the sub, the subdermal tattooing or horizontal subdermal
Mm.
tattooing, um, where you kind of have an entrance hole and an exit hole. You pull a needle and a thread through that. Where does the all fit in? And
Yeah.
how I was kind of like looking at the Americas, because the skin stitching is kind of dripping down from the north to the
Mm.
south, and actually surprisingly far south, where the initial idea is you are skin stitching if you're sewing a lot. And Inuit
Mm.
women are like the world champions of sewing in
I
fur
would
and skin.
imagine so because with the very cold climate, especially in the tribal days, you would
Yeah,
need to figure out a way to handle it
yeah,
through clothing and fabrics and stuff like
yeah.
that. So.
So and it was literally life and death, you know.
Mm.
If you have a hole in your boot and you go hunting for 3 days in -30, you could lose. And then
Yeah, my
there's
dad told me a
for
story.
anyone.
He worked as a plumber in Nuuk, uh,
Um,
no, in Tule, way back
yeah,
before I was born. And he once got a cut in his eyebrow in -50 outside in the winter when he was welding something, and he had to
yeah,
go inside it within 10 minutes, or the veins
yeah,
in his head would freeze
yeah.
just from that
It, it,
little cut, little spark cut. Not a
it,
big thing. Probably something that wouldn't even bleed if you had it like in
yeah.
in normal temperate weather, but it's the little cut. So I imagine the life and death situations where you read. That's
Oh, for
probably also
sure.
why you. I mean, I'm just assuming here, but I admit all my ignorance in this topic, but I imagine that's also why sealskin would come in handy sometimes because it's a bit more durable than just having some sort of a wool fabric or anything like that.
Oh, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, the seal skins and the bird skins are very
Mm.
important for insulation, and
Yeah.
there's like a whole high tech but low tech uh, thing going on, and when we look at the contemporary garment for very low temperature uh, expeditions, whatever, a lot of these techniques from the Inuit clothing are used still today.
Mm.
Uh, but of course, now nature is like this backdrop of a weekend or a vacation, and we have to remember that for the people that I'm researching, my great grandmothers and people, nature was not a backdrop. Nature was the world. That was it. That was the entire world. And it was, there's temper in the weather, and there's temper on the ocean and the ice, and it does what it does. There's no way of controlling it, but you can control how you manage yourself in it.
How you handle it, yeah.
Yes. And that is what my people are the experts of doing. And these technologies, many of them are super ingenious, and the sewing is a very big part of that. And it was obvious to me in the beginning, when I was naive and young and a baby in research, that of course we would use needle and thread for female tattooing because the females were sewing all the time. But then I started looking through the Americas, further down, south, and I started finding subdermal tattooing in areas where sewing, for sure, is not as important for survival. So there was another reason for it. It's not an easy way of tattooing. It's
I can imagine not. No.
Yeah, it's not very pleasant either. And it's, I mean, literally poking is what the whole world has done, and there's a reason for that. It's easy, it's smart, it's accessible. You can do it with a thorn or the tooth of a fish or a piece of metal or stone or whatever, and crafting a bone needle and removing the sinew from a seal and crafting it out of that. It's a lot. It's
some extra steps, for sure. Some extra steps.
In order to make tattoos that you could make so easy in other ways, But so I realized, okay, this is super important for some reason. Otherwise, why are we doing it? And when I found these people in South America doing this, and I was like, okay, what forefather do we have in common? And not surprisingly, like, I believe that all tattooing in North America, well, definitely the Arctic, not only believe it, it literally is so, has kind of like streamed in from Siberia. And the the beginning of our religion as well. And we people, I mean, it all starts in Siberia somewhere, and then it oozes over the Bering Strait into Alaska.
Well, it makes sense because especially in winter times, it would be just about landlocked back in the day. Siberia and North America, because it's not a very massive distance between Alaska to what is now Russia.
No, it's very close, and at some point during the Ice Age, and it has been dry, they think, and but even when the Bering Strait became a strait and it was filled with water, it's not a super long distance thing, and from there, from Alaska, around year 1000, the culture developed into having the tools and the technologies that are defining us in the archaeological term as the Thule culture or the Inuit culture. And so the Thule culture, every living Inuit, Inuk is the singular term, Inuk. Every single one of us are descendants of the Thule culture that came in from Siberia. And the Thule culture is from around year 1000. And then it was very, it was travelers, adventurers, and
nomadic people
were spreading and well, ending up as far as East Greenland. and West Greenland, South Greenland. At this time, in year 1000, the tattoo patterns and the tattooing was already 2,700 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So one could say that for the very first Thule people, the tattooing was already cultural heritage.
Yeah.
From the homelands in Siberia.
Very much so.
Yes. So today, we're looking at tattoos that are almost 4,000 years old. Even our culture is not as old as that. The tattooing was used and the patterns were used in the pre-Inuit peoples of the Arctic.
Wow.
If they tattooed them, who can tell?
That is at least more difficult to know, but I mean,
yes,
it's
that
possible.
is very, I mean, I would like a mummy that is older than my culture. I'm just saying, if
Yeah,
I could
no,
get
I get it. I get it.
as old as Ötzi, it would be nice. Because it would be pre-Thule, and maybe the mummy could have a little tattoo here and there. That would be lovely. But as for now, we have all these patterns on objects because these people were amazing carvers and they made masks and they made all kinds of things. And so we have physical objects and amulets that are, described or exhibited, or, we can touch them.
Yeah.
So that is how old that the patterns are, and our people have been using them from before it was the Thule culture, and up until around 50 years after the mission arrived. And the mission arrived in different times in various territories. So some people were tattooing until the 1930s. In the area of Greenland where I'm from, it stopped about 250 years ago.
Oy.
Yeah. So there is that gap, but that means that we have, photographs in color.
Yeah.
Traditionally tattooed Inuit women who have the same tattoos as the mummies that are around 500 years old, that has the same tattoos as the little mask that is 3,500 years old.
That is incredible to think about, that sort of living link between these historical points.
Yes. And for me, it is a very important point. And some people, their eyes glaze over a little bit when I start talking numbers like that. And it's easier if I have a blackboard and I can draw a line and say, this is a timeline.
Next time, Maya, next time we'll have a blackboard with you.
Yes, please. But it is important because what does it tell us? When a pattern doesn't change in 4,000 years, and it travels halfway around the Earth circumpolar, then it means something pretty important.
Absolutely.
It's not something you dabble with. It's not something you draw because you find
it's not a passing fad.
Oh.
It's not a fashionable statement or anything like that.
No. Which led me to the religion. I needed to understand, what is this? Well, first of all, some of the patterns are completely similar to physical amulets that are out there in ethnographic collections. And, so I was like, also knowing as an Inuit person, I was like, I know amulets are super important and as crucial for survival as it is, to have the right tools and know what's in your boots. So the amulet is just a natural part of Inuit life.
Yes.
Also, a lot of all these magnificent explorers who have described us wrote the women are curiously not wearing any amulets, or only very few,
Mm,
and mainly if they're pregnant. So why
interesting.
are the women not wearing amulets? They are tattooed from head to toe. So I was like, okay, so the tattoos are similar to physical amulets. They're just tattooed instead of
Yeah.
sewn into the clothes. I think it's amulets.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's a clearer link here to the spirituality of it than, for example, we've mentioned Ötzi a couple of times. It's a bit less easy to figure out exactly what Ötzi's tattoos means, and people still speculating over it. But here, there seems to be a very clear link between spirituality and community to
Yeah,
the patterns that Inuits used.
yes. And the whole idea of we're writing that in the Ötzi paper as well, that is kind of
Mm,
like after many discussions on what does it mean, and everybody are giving their 2 cents on
mm,
medicine, acupuncture, blah blah blah,
yeah.
and acupuncture happened what 2,000 years after Ötzi died or
Yeah, I
something,
would imagine so.
and also what point on your body is not an acupuncture.
That's the other
Yeah.
part.
So, oh, I also have tattoos on those. But
Yes.
there, there was some kind of idea of them being medicinal, perhaps because
Mm,
they would be covered by his pants or whatever. It was not as a communication for other people.
yeah.
So it could not be communication because people
Mm,
couldn't see them. And I was
yes.
like, that's insane.
Yeah, I
We,
agree.
we meet a lot. Like if I should translate Greenlandic to you into English, we would say we meet a lot of people or persons. We meet a lot of persons out there, and only some of them are humans. You know,
Mm,
so communication can also be to persons that are not human.
mm,
For persons who don't care if you're wearing pants, or
mm,
it's a religious thing, a spiritual thing somehow. And of course, it can be medicinal, but
mm.
often the medicine is also connected to religion. And if we have to talk about animism if we talk about the religion, and that the the tattooing and animism is interconnected here.
Mm.
And one could look at Ötzi and think that might be the same, because 98% of all peoples on earth have had animistic religions at
Yeah,
some
yeah,
point.
absolutely.
And 98% of all nowadays religions started animistic.
Yeah.
And so kind of animism is kind of like the default mode of human beings, I
Mm.
believe. I mean, I was talking to my husband about it. He's an archaeologist. He's a material culture guy.
Okay. Nice.
So we have interesting conversations.
I would imagine so.
But the thing is that, if you see like an ad for say like FiberNet,
Mm,
internet ads, they will show you like a cable, and there will be
mm,
like this bleep, 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 traveling through it.
mm,
They have to animate it for us to see it's alive, it's doing its
mm.
thing. So it's still like a very logical way of thinking for us people,
Yeah.
a way of understanding, to
Mm,
make things more understandable in this crazy universe of ours, where we are trying to grasp the truth of life and death. And so
mm,
animism is a big thing, and Inuit religion is animistic. And
mm,
so everything is alive, everything has a force, a life force, and is spirited. And these spirits have a home, which is the invisible world. Let's call it
Mm.
that. We call our world Sila. Sila is our universe, and Silam Atba is the spirit world, and
Mm.
Silam Atba literally means the other Sila, or
Okay.
the partner, the similar thing, or the opposite. Like my husband is my Atba. He's the
Ah,
same,
okay.
but different. We're partners, but we are opposites, like
Mm.
big night, like land and ocean, summer
Mm.
and winter, light and darkness, and the visible world and the invisible world. So the
Mm.
tattoos are a communication form and also a way of pleasing the
Mm.
spirit world. Because the spirits are, here in the visible world, we just can't see them unless we have that training or are born that way, and become that special person who's in charge of communication between the two worlds. But for the rest of us, they are all here right now, but we
Mm.
can't see them. But if they leave us, we will get sick or die.
Mm.
And we have many spirits in our body, and all of these spirits of the tool, spirits in the stone, the creek, the pebble, the mountain, the plant, the animals, the weather, the ocean, all of those spirits are called Inuit. So we
Okay.
have Inuit in us, and then we have like our main life force, the
Mm.
Dharma. And that is the thing that will pass on to the spirit world when we die.
Okay.
Yeah. So the tattoos are like a communication form and a way
Yes.
of pleasing these spirits, because if they get upset, then that balance is just hair fine. Okay.
All right.
There's a lot of rules and taboos, and if you break just one little one, then they get upset, and then we starve. There's famine. It's a whole thing.
Mm.
It's huge. It's
Mm.
very, very complex
I
and
get I
big.
get why it could have annoyed you that people thought it was just superstition, because it seems like a very organized
It is.
religion to a great extent.
And it has a great understanding of cosmos, and
Mm.
it's a multiverse, and it is
Mm.
by far not, you know, simple or primitive.
No.
Actually, um, should I compare it to Christianity? And Christianity won. Okay, cool. They
Well,
did.
I'm an atheist anyway. I don't like Christianity, so it's
Uh,
okay.
how, how do you write the date? You know?
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, no. I get historically. Yeah, yeah. The
Yes.
whole
So
crusading and all that. Yeah.
but they were also kind of mean about it, and
Oh
aggressive
yeah,
about it,
absolutely.
and the whole idea of having missionaries.
Yeah.
The world must know this. Anyways, um,
Yeah.
but if I compare the two religions to each other, I actually find Christianity primitive.
Yeah, it's very it's much simpler, I would argue,
It is.
in a strange way. It is quite simpler. There's uh
It is. It is easy
yeah,
to obey. It is done with force, like
yeah,
the punishment in the afterlife or reward. And
yeah,
however you're doing now, nobody gives a shit. You know,
yeah,
just bow your head and work.
yeah,
Um, where the Inuit religion is much more, it is your duty to understand as much as you can. Where
yeah,
in Christianity, only one guy can. We
yeah.
all know. But we have the duty to understand and understand,
Mm.
because everything we learn and understand is passed on to the next generation, not only
Mm.
as the oral tradition or
Mm.
seeing how people are working, but also in a spiritual way. And
Mm.
this passing on to the next generation thing means that I am the sum of every experience of every ancestor of mine.
Okay, so it's not really reincarnation, so to speak, but there's sort of a shared experience through spirituality with previous generations.
Yes, and this is that's where the complexities
Mm,
arrive, because how do you explain that a
yeah.
child is the sum of generations of experience? And the only reason why the child is born is because all those generations knew how to survive.
I wonder, and this is going to be very nerdy, but I wonder now if Frank Herbert took inspiration from the Inuit. Well, he wouldn't have known it was a religion back then, but from Inuit religions or something similar, because in his masterpiece Dune, there are certain people that suddenly get reborn in this way, and they remember all their previous lives through generation, all that, and it makes them much more aware and some of that. Very similar to this, weirdly enough. Sorry, that was just
But
I digressed a bit, but yeah.
I don't think it is a particular Inuit thing.
No, okay, no.
It is an original people's thing.
I
I
think so
think
too.
an animistic thing.
Yeah,
When you view the world as something living
yeah,
that has breath, thought, willpower,
mm,
temper, and etc.,
mm.
then you act accordingly in
Yeah.
that world.
Yeah, because you find similar things in Japanese original Shinto religion. You find similar things in the Samoan and the Maori religions and all over the
Yes.
world in Native American
Yeah.
religions. So yeah, I would tend to agree with you that in animistic religions there is much more care placed onto interactions, not just with other people, but also with inanimate and immaterial.
Yeah. And I think the trouble started for this world the moment where we, in this era of death matter,
Mm,
where we started owning land, owning air, owning
mm,
uh, borders on. I mean, it's crazy. And but in Greenland, as well as in many other places where you have indigenous people, there are certain um, legislation that is kind
mm.
of based on this way of thinking. You
Yeah.
have a river, I believe it's a river in New Zealand that has, right as a sentient being. And in
Oh,
Greenland, you cannot own land. You get permits to build your
yeah.
house. You cannot own land at all. You can only get permits. And if no one takes over the house, you have to remove it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how Greenland got its international airport. The American airbase closed
Yeah.
down, and the Americans were like, "You can have it," rather than removing it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So this animism,
Mm,
whenever I'm doing a, a, a public talk or I'm teaching or whatever, I always try to place people in this worldview, in
mm,
this life where nature is not a backdrop for your vacation. It's
no.
your world. You have no idea that there's anything outside of that
Mm,
particular territory of nature that you can reach to the ends of during a
no.
lifetime. That's the world. And
Mm,
also, you are the least powerful in that environment,
mm-hmm.
which is weird for Western human beings today to
I'd imagine.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's the Arctic. It's cold as shit. It's hot,
Yeah, that's
you know, and, and,
yeah.
and survival is just really hard. I have very many women coming to me asking for patterns for their children, the fact that
Mm,
they have mothers, or how many children they have, girls, they have boys. And I'm like, that was like not even part of the conversation back then. It
no.
was like, you have to have children so we can continue
Yeah,
to
so the yeah.
but my baby, no. It's, you know, I mean, this is part of the maybe where we can step into the era of reintroducing Inuit tattooing, all its complexity to fast-moving
Modern
Greenland.
world, you would say.
Yeah, and Greenland has, uh, the lid has been lifted. We are no
Yeah.
longer isolated, and we
Hmm.
have internet. And before it was just Denmark, Denmark, Denmark.
Yeah,
Everything.
that's I mean, that's even in my generation. I mean, I'm 20
Yeah,
years younger than you, and even in my generation, growing up in school, you got taught that Greenland is part of Denmark, and like I think it was quite new in my generation. We also got taught that, of course, you have your own culture. If you go back earlier than mine,
yeah,
that was sort of erased. Like you
yeah.
weren't taught. If you
And
go back
and
to talk to people that grew up in the 70s or the 80s, they might not even learn about any Inuit culture in Greenland or any
oh,
Greenlandic culture at all.
not at all. I
No.
assure you, nothing.
Yeah.
And Greenlandic culture for most Danish people who are older than you is
Yes, yes.
Knud Rasmussen. You know. And,
Yeah, yeah, that's about
um,
it.
yeah. Anyways, what Danish kids did learn was that they were part of the world.
Yeah.
Uh, Neighbors to Germany, the
Mm.
Nordic neighbors, kids would travel to Spain on holiday, or, and they would grow up and go backpacking in Thailand or whatever. And in Greenland, it was not like that. In Greenland, we went on vacation to Denmark, and we went to the hospital to Denmark, and we went on education
Yeah.
stays in Denmark. It's not until now, the last 10, 15 years, perhaps,
Mm.
that, I met a young Greenlandic man who had studied physics in India. And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, you know, uh, because that was just not even,
Yeah,
I
now
couldn't
that you say it,
think.
I've never met a Greenlandic I mean, I've met another kind of Inuk person, but not from Greenland outside of
Yeah,
Denmark. But I've never met a Greenlandic person
no,
outside of Denmark.
no. And well, they are going now.
I mean, that's good as well, but
It's like well, we are nomads. We like traveling and we're
Mm.
excited about new land, and we just don't claim it. We just visit.
Yeah, that's very uncouth. I mean, it's- yeah. Whew. Yeah, we've done that a few times, so like,
Here and there, you
yeah.
know. Yeah. Oh, Denmark. No,
Yeah.
it's but what has been very successfully implemented in Greenland
Mm.
is the Western mindset, the
Yeah.
Christian mindset, and what maybe more importantly, what has successfully been erased,
Mm.
rather than what has been adopted or forced upon or whatever. What
Yeah.
has been erased, and is continuously being erased,
Yeah.
is that sense of community.
Yeah.
Still, our community is stronger than the Danish. Um,
Yes.
our sense of community. I mean,
Yes.
if you look at I don't mean to offend no Danish people at all, but if you look at like the family, a family described by a Danish person is grandparents, parents, children, parents, siblings, perhaps, and their
Mm.
children. It's quite narrow.
Yeah.
To me, that is just the immediate family. I
Like,
have almost 400 cousins in first, second, fourth, third, and fourth. Um,
mm.
how do you say it? Um,
I can't remember, but I get what you mean. Like that.
yeah, and it's my cousins. I say, cousin, hey cousin, how are you,
Mm.
cousin? And
Yeah.
and I have siblings is just siblings, and
Yeah.
so we're not we are not, you know, our family is much wider and much bigger, and the sense of community, especially in the rural areas, is still very strong, as in a sense that we survive together, you know.
Yeah.
And this collectivism we've been forced away from that, and has held on to it because it's culture, and that's just what we do. But I see, like, I live part-time in Greenland, and so half the time, my husband and I, we are in Greenland, and we are in the capital. We are in Nuuk,
All right.
which is a fast-growing tiny city of what, 20 people, but you know, it has become 20,000 from 16,000 in no time, and
Yeah.
it's going very fast. And I see that the bigger the towns are, the more cafes and more internet connection, and the more, you know, westernized type of living there is, the less collectivism, sense of collectivism is present, and the more popular are the tattoos.
Yeah, I imagine that it's probably a lot of Western tattooing as well that's getting very popular.
Western tattooing is popular all over Greenland,
Yeah, I would imagine so.
everywhere. But traditional, original Inuit tattooing is only by those people who have left the culture more or less behind, or has a leg, you know.
Yeah.
I've never tattooed a hunter's wife, never. I have never ever had to go to, you know, along the coast to a tiny settlement and tattoo people there. They don't need it, because it has been simplified and diluted down to an identity marker. And the
Yeah.
more Western you are, the more you need to flaunt your identity in a more visible way. Then comes the next step. Then we have the politics. It becomes a political thing, and then suddenly I'm a political thing without wanting to it. And you know, so it's a very interesting phenomenon that you have those who live closest to the traditional culture are not interested in the tattoos, and those who live the furthest away, they can't live without them.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I get the sense of wanting to sort of claim a sort of sense of cultural identity again, but also get what you're sort of pointing out, that the way they're doing it, even though there might be the right patterns, is lacking some of the old traditions that were tied to that tattoo culture.
Yes, it is removed from spirituality. It's removed from ritual. It is removed from original purpose, and it is not the original patterns.
Yeah, but I get that. So
We
I
had,
mean,
I told
I
out by
understand
saying
also.
the
Yeah.
pattern is 4,000 years old,
Yes.
unchanged, 4,000 years, not moving, because they're important. The last 7 to 8 years, the patterns have, like, we have maybe 15 different variations of patterns in the original pattern base. I stopped counting at 80 when I
Oh,
started.
wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, if I should tell you what defines tribal tattooing, then I would say, in my experience from looking at tribal tattooing for the last 14 years, or 13, 14 years, and what I see is that you have a pattern base of around 15 to 25 patterns that are repeated, different variations, and according to tribe, sub-tribe, clan, etc.
Yeah.
15 to 25. And these patterns are followed like gospel.
Yeah.
You're not it has nothing to do with like, but I find them prettier from the other side of the river.
Mm.
No, get what belongs to you from
Yeah.
the area you're from. But Western tattooing has also a certain amount of patterns. People seem to think like it's an endless choice of whatever you want, but let me tell you, after 24 years of tattooing, people are getting the same damn things, all of them, you know. So
Mm.
it's still a limited amount of things that we do. In certain periods, it's dolphins, in other periods, it's Japanese, and then it's, these trends that come and go.
Yeah.
Right now, tattoos are itty bitty small. I don't get it. They're like
I mean, on that we agree. That I don't get the very small tattoos either.
so silly. Cute but silly. Anyways,
Yeah.
so what is happening is that when you have around 80 to 100 different types of things that you tattoo, that is basically what contemporary Western tattooing is.
Yeah.
You know, that is what Inuit tattooing has become now.
Mm.
So rather than being a revival, we are looking at a reinvention.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, that point I absolutely understand because as me and Maya were emailing a bit back and forth planning this episode, I got a bit of more understanding from Maya telling me off about some of our original questions. And I'm exaggerating, but Maya enlightened me about some of the points I might not have been thinking about myself, and I completely see that point. That I get that it's not in the same way reclaiming ancient culture or heritage. I get the point that they want to claim an identity as being Greenlandic or anything like that, and that the suits my views, but it is more, as you say, a reinvention than
Yeah,
a rediscovery of ancient tattooing. It's
yeah,
very inspired by it, of course, but there is new purpose and there are new patterns and all that stuff, which
yes,
it divorces it from the more spiritual traditions and
yeah,
rules and all that.
yes. And are they still valuable? Yes, of course.
Of
If
course,
it
of course.
if it gives people some kind of sense of who they are,
Mm.
it's fine, lovely.
Yeah.
However, that is not my job. My
No.
job is to research and preserve,
Yes, yes, yes.
you know. So how do I do that? Apparently not really by tattooing. Apparently,
Apparently not. No.
which was my go-to method as a
Mm.
tattooer. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, let's have babies that grow up seeing their moms tattooed.
Yeah.
That would be lovely." Uh, but in all these years, I have made one original traditional
Yeah.
clan tattoo in the face of a woman, and that
Mm.
was a woman from Nunavik in Canada. So
Okay,
out
yeah.
of hundreds of women that I have tattooed in connection with my research, one face is original.
So most go for the reinvented rather than the reclaimed,
Yeah,
so to speak, version.
yes, yes. And that version literally is just smaller. It's like
Yeah.
it's Greenlandic women, 11 to 12 lines on the chin
Mm.
is a bit much for most people. So they choose one without thinking about that maybe one line on the chin is some other people
Mm.
somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, especially something that simple, it would be not be strange to think that that would have popped up somewhere else in the world
Somewhere
in
else,
some tribal
right?
culture or something. Uh,
Yeah. So the thing is though, so here we are. This is where it becomes a problem for me.
okay.
So you have all these people who are using contemporary Inuit tattoo patterns
Yes.
that are similar to other people's tattoo patterns, other
Mm.
original peoples in the world. Some of them are.
Yeah.
Yet they claim them to be traditional Inuit tattooing. They
Mm.
are thought about and worked around as traditional Inuit tattooing. And that kind of murks the water
Yeah, I
on,
get your point there. Like it makes it more difficult to spot
yeah.
the real from the fact, so to speak.
I've been trying to implement the thought and in the
Mm.
language something along neo-traditional,
No,
perhaps.
I get it. I mean,
Yeah,
it works. Etymologically, it very much works to describe it in a way that yes, it's taken inspiration from the
yeah.
traditional, but it's a new version. It's something else. It's not the same rules. It's not the same connotations, nor the same connections in it.
Let's just say that most people were not as excited about this idea as you are. So
No, I am also very much a massive nerd, so I am the odd one out.
and I'm like, well, okay, I'm not you guys' mom. I'm also not here to lead a revolution. I'll just bow my
No,
head,
no, no.
work, and I publish and I do what I
But
can.
I think I mean I come here as a sociology student, so I get the beautiful thing and the sort of nice message in young Greenlandic people wanting to claim some cultural heritage in a way, but also the modern one. But the problem is, I get what you're saying as well, that some of them are misinformed and misguided and think that they're at the same time
Yeah,
reclaiming this ancient traditional thing. They're not. It's way much more like claiming a stake of having a unique and distinct Greenlandic culture separate
yeah,
from the Danish colonial culture.
yeah,
And in that way, the modern version of Greenlandic tattoos could work. But I
yeah,
also very much get your point that they're not exactly connecting you back in the way most people do them to
yeah.
the ancient spiritual Inuit traditions and stuff like that.
And why do we need that? People could ask, like, why does that matter? Well, it matters because we are colonized people,
Mm.
and we have
Yeah.
been forced to take on a different religion and a
Yeah.
different worldview, and we are immensely confused about who we are.
Well, it's the same. It's the
Yeah,
same reason it matters to the Maori to keep their ancient tattoo traditions alive, and luckily
yeah.
theirs have. They've been very lucky that theirs have been preserved quite well throughout history. That's more
Yeah.
luck than anything. That
However, I was in New Zealand in
yes,
Aotearoa, as they would say,
yeah.
in 2015, I believe, and I was at this convention and conference for Indigenous people
All
working
right,
with
yeah.
the teachers of their own culture, and I was just starting. I've done research for 5 years at this point, and I had just gone to Alaska for the first year of my project in Alaska. And after Alaska, I went to New Zealand that year. And I was being very much a traditionalist.
Yeah.
I have Asperger's, and I can be quite rigid about things. I'm trying on my I'm 54 years old, so I'm learning to loosen up a little bit. But 2015, I was not that far. Okay, so I was like, but it can only be done one way, and the
Mm,
ancestors have spoken. They have designed it, they have made the reasoning,
mm,
they have explained it. We need not to play artist and do this ourselves. And actually, at that conference, people were like, being a traditionalist is super good. And that is what we needed here because we have fucked up our own patterns.
mm,
The Cree tradition is well preserved, but it is also used the wrong way for a long
mm.
time. And 30 years down the road, I was told, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing here, but they were like,
Yeah.
now we have to clean up our own mess. You guys should be really
Mm,
careful about doing this,
yeah.
about, introducing new patterns into the old
Mm,
pattern. And uh, and the Maoris have maybe complicated it even further because they have allowed a lot of Westerners to get their tattoos
yeah.
and but made specific tattoos for them,
Yeah.
and that got blended in
I mean,
somehow.
even I'm guilty of having a Polynesian tattoo done by a Polynesian woman, but
Yeah.
still, that
Yes.
I take your point that even if you keep certain patterns sacred, it still makes the task more difficult. If you want to make it easier to preserve the culture, you need to be a bit
Yeah.
more rigid at times about what you
Yes,
allow.
and the problem is that we do not have a council that says yes and no, and
No,
has guidance.
it's very
And
much the discretion of the individual tattooer. That's the
exactly,
Yeah.
the individual tattooer and the individual client who's
Yeah.
getting the tattoo, because the individual tattooer has bills to pay, babies to feed, and whatnot, and we just wanna we survive, and
Yeah.
so, but everybody should do better somehow. So I started looking into, how do we do that? How can we do this better? What are the ethics guidelines? I started reading up on the UN ethics guidelines.
Oh, wow.
Every guideline there's ever written on how to work with original culture in an
Yeah.
area is written as guidelines for outsiders coming in.
Damn.
No one has ever had the idea to say, how does a colonized people deal with their own
Well,
cultural
it is a
heritage?
co- it is an organization started by colonizers. So I mean,
I was, I was talking to my husband about it. Even before he was my husband, we were having a meeting at the National Museum in Greenland, and he kind of casually, it's very rude, this, but there's truth to it. But
yes.
if people are that westernized that they feel that they can do this to the cultural heritage, then the Western ethics codes also applies to them.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
not going to be the messenger who says that to the indigenous people of this world.
no. I would say that's very much uh, there's certain I think actually a black tattoo artist I interviewed recently said it in a very good way that the empathy to sympathize with what a people, especially indigenous people, have gone through is what's needed to
Yeah,
to so to a great extent, not just from people from outside of that indigenous culture, but also from people within the indigenous culture themselves.
yeah,
Uh, the empathy to understand and sympathize is a very good way of handling difficult topics in a nice and ethical way. And
yes.
also, especially
But,
if you're not
but
sure about the ethics.
yes, yes. The trouble is, though, it's a very beautiful way of seeing it, and it
Mm,
is how it should be. There should be empathy and sympathy.
mm,
However, we have all these post-colonial
mm.
mechanisms like lateral violence, and
Yeah.
people are upset, desperate, angry, in doubt of who they are,
Mm.
uh, and it's bloody hard to
Yeah.
find empathy and sympathy then.
Yeah.
Oh dear. I'm gonna plug you in. I have to hold it now because
It's okay.
you're
Thank you.
plugged in.
Well, we are also getting to that time where we have been talking for an hour, and it's been absolutely fascinating, I gotta say. Uh, uh,
There's one thing we did not cover. The question was asked and the
yes,
reply was never given. How are the mummies mummified in Greenland?
yes. Sorry, I
Yeah.
even forgot that I asked that. We've been on a wild journey by now. But yes,
Yeah. They are not ice mummies. They are usually in caves or like stone
oh
graves,
right, okay.
and the pure lack of humidity and water, and then the cold. It has to be like uh, not warmer than +4, then you will mummify.
Yeah, because the bacteria won't be able to multiply in the same way that as it would in a normal grave or anything like that, I
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah. And Greenland has like a treasure of tattooed mummies. The
Mm.
biggest find on the North American continent of tattooed mummies is
Wow.
in Greenland. Well preserved, beautiful, beautiful mummies from Northwest Greenland. We have a tattooed mummy in South Greenland. She's still in her grave.
Oh,
And I I did the find of her tattoo patterns last summer.
wow.
More mummies reportedly coming. I'm in the research group for both the North Greenland and the South Greenland, different work,
Nice.
uh,
Yeah.
different tasks for different mummies. And we have A very exciting. Well, he's skeletal now. He's remembered as a mummy. I've never seen
Okay,
him,
okay.
but he's beheaded, and he is buried in several graves. So his spirit,
Wow.
he was an infamous killer.
Yeah, but I was about to
Um,
say he probably wasn't well liked if they did that.
and his every person he killed, legend says, every person he killed, he had a blue uh, little line tattooed in his face, and he was traveling
Wow.
the north of Greenland down to the south in his kayak, in a kayak.
Okay,
And
wow.
so when he reached South Greenland, he was completely blue in his face, they say.
Yeah, I suddenly get why they took the head off him, to be
Yeah.
honest.
But his skull is there in its grave, and it's
Yeah.
quite scary actually. And the locals are still using him as a weather forecast. They kind of say, I forget which, but if the head is far back in the grave, the winter will be mild. And if it's far in the front of the grave, it will be a hard winter, or opposite. So apparently, this skull is moving around in the grave, which is scary. And this guy, his name was Usulissuaq, which means the man with the big penis. And,
I
and
don't
he
get why
was,
he killed people then. Like it sounds like it was pretty.
maybe,
What was he so angry about? I mean, isn't that the most men's dream?
I know, maybe it was satire. I don't know. Maybe it was,
But it might have been the first recorded version of hardball sarcasm ever.
but he was a very famous Angakok, which is the shaman of our people,
Okay,
and
yeah,
it's called the Angakok. So this furiously angry killer Anekko is buried several places. He was a mummy. He's not anymore, but his tattoos are remembered. There's living memory of it.
yeah.
And it is one of those places where archaeology, you have like a location and you have legend or myth,
Mm,
oral tradition, and hard evidence in one place. And
yeah.
that
I
is,
mean, that is enough to infer that there's some truth to it.
yes.
But I was thinking because I do know that even today, if you press too hard with a needle, you can leave indentations in bone. So to imagine with, I mean, depending on if they use the skin stitching, I would think a horizontal approach would be quite difficult to yank into the bone, even in the face.
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah.
is it possible you could find ink marks on the skull?
Well, if the person who did the tattoo was really bad at it, I
Yeah,
suppose
but I
so.
mean, yeah. I mean, I feel safe to at least slag off an ancient, dead for centuries tattoo artist. I'll say that much. I don't think he's gonna come for me, but yeah.
No,
Uh,
no. But I mean, there was no person in the settlement who was like the designated tattooer. Everybody
oh,
did it, or
okay.
or
Yeah,
you
because
know,
in some cultures, again, the most ancient ones I know more about is, for example, the Maori, where they would have no, the Samoans, I think it was, would have this designated like shaman who did the
yeah,
tattooing. I might remember wrong, but
yeah.
there are some cultures with that. But in the Inuit one, it's everyone. You say,
It's women tattooing women, and
yeah,
also women tattooing themselves. And
okay,
I have found stories where it is kind of written down that it had to be started by an older woman. But again,
okay,
uh, we are so very many people, although we're few, many different little tribes and
yeah.
different
Lots
variations.
of different. I mean, it didn't take much back in that time period, no matter which indigenous culture you're talking about. For example, the Native Americans, good example. A lot of them are very angry when people just say, "Oh, you're all just one big culture before we came here." No, they were several different people with
Yeah,
distinct cultures.
yes.
Similar things shared between them, but still distinct cultures. And I would imagine it would be the same. That's also why before today I was very hesitant and wanted to know if I could say Inuit, because I didn't know if there might have been a different word, for Canadian, for people in the Canadian territories that are Inuit, and in Alaska. And those are both big areas with different cultures between their different tribes as well. So, there's a lot,
Yeah.
Greenland's massive as well. So there would have been lots of different tribes, I imagine.
In Greenland, what Danish people probably don't know is that we have, different cultures as well. We have the Inuit and the Dunamit, and where the languages are also different. I don't understand Inuit, for instance, and Inuit I can understand better, but it's still like Danish and Swedish. And but then there are people in Canada that speak very similar to the dialects that from
that's
my
the
area.
thing with the nomadic way of life of a lot of the old tribes, as you were talking about. So they could crisscross in all sorts of ways.
Yes, and the Dunamit, the East Greenlanders, their language is like easy to understand for the Inuit who lives in the northern Alaska. So it's a crisscross, but we kind of have a lot of things in common. Tattooing definitely being one of them. Drum dancing, the drumming and the spirituality, and also our old tradition, our creational myths. They are from Siberia or Alaska, and I mean we have legends where there's the description of eating gilifat, which is the woolly mammoth.
Wow.
I know.
Mammoth. Yeah. That's incredible.
I mean, we're not that old, but they were frozen in the tundra or whatever.
You went into the freezer.
It's weird. You're kind of like sitting there in Greenland, and you're listening to stories as a kid about the gilifat, and
it's
the last
incredible.
gilifat was on Wrangler Island by Siberia, and that's the youngest mammoth found, I believe.
Wow. Right. Maya, before we start a new podcast episode about mammoths, we've got to wrap that up a bit. But I have a last little question I want to ask you to sort of end it on it's actually been a very enjoyable episode, so I don't want to give the wrong sort of impression now, but to end it on a lighter note, I want to ask you, what's your favorite traditional Inuit pattern you've tattooed?
What's my favorite? I love the dot work. I love the work from the people called Inuit, which is the southern East Greenlandic tribe. And I found some tattoo patterns in a medicinal report described in Latin, and
Wow.
but I drew them down from description on the lateral side of this arm and blah blah, on I think 12 to 15 women and one man and a child, and those tattoos are breathtaking. They are so beautiful.
Imagine.
And they are consisting almost only out of dots that are creating patterns.
That's beautiful.
I love doing those.
And now they have a piece of living history in a way on them, thanks to you. So that's amazing.
Which is even more amazing because the people are gone. Wow. The last ones migrated down to Southwest Greenland in year 1900 due to famine, due to white people whaling.
Wow.
Yeah. So they ended up down south and got mixed into the West Greenland population there.
Their sort of heritage got washed out a bit
And their territory where they used to live, there's no people there now. Now you only find people further north up in the Sialuk, the Sialuk area, and further north. And so the people are gone. the descendants are
Yeah.
there, but the
Yeah.
culture is gone. But I found these tattoos in this medicinal report from year
Fantastic.
1900, and they are just breathtaking. They're so beautiful.
What a beautiful note to end this on as well. Like that's a great, fantastic story to end this on. And very nicely encapsulating the whole sort of uh, array of topics we've been covering today. So, Maya, to end this, I have one final thing to do, which is first of all, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank
It's
you.
I've learned a ton of stuff about Inuit tattooing today, and I think anybody listening in or watching this episode are going to learn more than they bargained for, to be honest, listening to this. But should people wish to learn even more about Inuit tattooing, will you please tell
Yeah.
them where they can find more of your research and see more of the stuff you do?
Yes. I have an Instagram account, but
Yes,
I'm terrible at it. I got it. It's not, there's
I
not,
do.
immense action, but it's just Inuit tattoo traditions on Instagram. Otherwise, this is my publishing year.
Wow.
My chapter in the Oxford Handbook of the Archaeology and Anthropology of Body Modification is coming out this year. And I have a chapter on Inuit tattooing, the amuletic patterns of Inuit tattooing, and also I co-author a tool chapter, like a global
Wow.
distribution of pre-electric tools chapter in the Oxford University handbook. Also, the Utsi paper is coming out. I'm writing, I just wrote an article for a Norwegian magazine called The Vessel. It's also coming out.
Oh.
Bunch of stuff. Otherwise, Google me. There's a bunch of podcasts
I
out
mean,
there.
your name will be everywhere on the episode, so you should be very easy to Google, I will say.
Yes, and I don't think I think I'm the only one who has this name combination,
I have
perhaps.
at least not met others called Maya Sialuk yet. I'll
No,
say
me
that
neither.
much. And with
No.
your experience of with way more years in the surf than me not having met it, I would say it's safe to say there's probably not many.
No, no. But
But
there's stuff out there for sure.
absolutely, and I would say it's well
I do
worth checking
public
out.
talks. I do public talks in Denmark and Greenland once in a while, and
Mm.
if people
Well,
ask to.
I think they will. Maya, thank you so much for being on here. To anybody
Thank
listening
you.
in, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it was a bit different from what we might usually do here on this podcast, diving into something as spiritual and profound and interesting as Inuit tattoo traditions, which is important to understand as well because there are different ways of doing and using tattoos than what we might be used to nowadays in the modern, more westernized culture of most of the world. And it's important to remember that that's not how everybody sees it, and to give voice to people who may see it differently than ourselves as well. And I can't thank Maya enough for being on here and guiding both me and any of you who might be listening or watching through this lesson, I would almost call it, into what Inuit tattoos are and were. But next time we're changing direction drastically again. Having someone that may be famous to any of you that might be interested in the STEM sciences, which is not my field. I'm in the social sciences myself. Which is I call her the STEM press, but Leah Elson, who is a STEM science communicator, but also a scientist in her own right, and also a massive tattoo fan. And she's often been asked to talk about her tattoo sleeve, for example, which is inspired by her work in STEM, quite a bit of it, and to talk about her tattoos and that. So I thought, hey, why not give her a chance to come to this podcast? And she came on, and it was actually quite a delightful episode that I think you should look forward to, where we talk about what it's like to be a STEM scientist with tattoos, and especially from a woman's perspective. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy that episode as well, and stay tuned for more.